Same sign. Motion carried. Before I get to citizens' comments, you'll notice there's an addition of time blocks added on the left-hand side of the agenda. So one thing I wanted to point out is that we're not just allowing 6 minutes for citizen comments if there was citizen comments. The impetus for some of the time blocks were that our meetings were getting to be a little long. We recognize that in each of our meetings, there's guests that appear on the agenda. So one of the reasons why these were added was to give those individuals a little bit of an idea of time frame of when they would be up to speak. This isn't a hard timeline. We recognize that there's some discussion points and topics that may take longer, or, Dr. Lund's not going to sound an air horn if you go, a minute over. I mean, he might, but we just wanted to more or less have some discussion time to just keep the meetings at an appropriate length for not only everyone at the table, but guests. Again, these timelines are a guideline to follow. They're not a hard deadline, but it also encourages individuals, if they have questions about topic areas, to reach out to those who could maybe answer some of those questions prior to the meeting, so that you have those questions answered, and then we can discuss those as well. So, citizen comments. I don't have any blue cards. Cindy, do you have any? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to make any comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to superintendent recommendations for discussion. Review of school board norms. Jeff, would you mind reading those?
School board meeting norms. The norms are: be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Item B, school reopening update. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 6 of your electronic packet or your hard copy, you see the memo that was presented to you for tonight's meeting. We'll be talking about the 5 bulleted points, along with some additional information from Ms. Galach and Mr. Thompson, respectively. So the first thing I'd like to say is, given the extraordinary pressures that all of us have been under, whether they're internal or external, we are now into the 3rd week of school. We made it to week 3. And when we looked at our overall adult absences in week 1, we had what I would call 12 positive cases of adults, COVID-related that is, with 33 close contacts. Last week by the end of the week, those numbers dropped significantly. I believe we had 3 positive IDs for adults and 10 close contacts. So that trajectory is going in the right direction. We're hopeful and optimistic that given the CDC guidelines that we're following, that we have in place, our cleaning that we have in place at all of our buildings and all of our classrooms, it's my hope that we'll continue to move in this direction. Just an important side note, last Friday I was in a meeting with superintendents from the 16 largest school districts across the state, and that's also a time where assistant superintendents meet, curriculum directors, business managers, and HR directors. And I will say in my conversation with superintendents, we're the only large school district that's face-to-face K through 8, and lots of questions came my way after that meeting. As a matter of fact, right up until 5:20 today, some districts are trying to figure out how to pivot and get K-5 in a day-to-day face-to-face. They weren't talking about middle school yet, at least the one superintendent I talked to later this afternoon. But just wondering how we pulled it off. And because we're able to offer those options where parents could keep their kids at home or send them to school, for the most part, the metric worked out fairly well. Did we have a couple of hot spots in the district where it was pretty difficult to get to the 6-foot distancing? Absolutely. But as I said to you in my Friday focus and my video messages to staff, I'm just more than pleased with 100% of our people wearing masks probably 95% of the time. Even during situations where they don't have to have their masks on, people are choosing to leave them on. So whatever we thought might be the pushback from students in particular. It's been a non-issue. I had a conversation with high school student leadership teams last Wednesday, both at Red River and Central, and I'll tell you what, I was pleasantly surprised having a conversation with young adults, not high school students, but young adults, about the meeting really wasn't about masks and CDC guidelines. It was more about attending a football game. But I will say that it was an absolute pleasure to meet with those students and to see how respectful they were and being respectful of each other, right down to when they were done with the chairs they were sitting in, they all went to the cloths, to the wipes, and they took care of their chairs and equipment shortly thereafter. So the other thing that I'll share with you before I turn it over is COVID-19 is going to come with an extraordinary expense to the school district. It's going to come, every school district is facing the very same issues. There likely will be some opportunities, some different buckets of funding that we'll be able to tap into. It's premature for me to say anything else about that tonight, but we're optimistic that we might be able to balance to some degree our COVID-related expenses, because it'll be in that $3.5 to $4 million range before all is said and done. So with that, I will stop right there, and I will turn it over to Mr. Thompson and Ms. Galach for their talking points.
Catherine, you okay if I go first? Please. Okay. So as Dr. Brenner mentioned, this is our third week to the school year, and we've spent the first couple of weeks just establishing our classroom routines and our norms. We've gotten to know our teachers and our classmates, addressed any technology issues that have come up for some of our families, and this week we're moving more into some curriculum, more teaching and learning expectations for our 4 content areas. If you don't know, we've actually assigned team leaders to each of the grade levels, so kindergarten through grade 5 has a team leader. It's been an existing teacher that's a veteran teacher to help provide resources for their colleagues, schedule grade level meetings, and then they actually are meeting with me on a weekly basis to start the school year here. So we had our first meeting last Friday with the team leaders. I can't say enough about the CIT department. Amy Barch and Eric Ripley have just been tremendous support for technology, for curriculum resources, and for letting our distance learning teachers borrow the expertise of the IDCs. They've just been excellent resources in getting our distance learning program up and running. Specialists start this week, so music, PE, Spanish, library, art, and some counseling lessons will start this week, so we're excited about getting those specials up and running. We've also set a materials distribution schedule for the remainder of the trimester, and Wednesday will be our first distribution day, so each school has set aside time during the day for parents to come in and drop off homework, pick up additional materials, maybe some library books, and that sort of thing. So we have those scheduled throughout the first trimester. And then just some stats from our distance learning program. We have 27 distance learning teachers. 5 of those are brand new hires that are new to our district. And then 22 were existing teachers from our current face-to-face programming. We have, as of last week, this could change on a daily basis, but we had 634 students enrolled in distance learning. It's our largest elementary school, to put it in perspective. The average class size in those K through 5 classrooms is 23.5, and that fluctuated a little bit as we came down to D-Day for some of our parents. I think we would have preferred that be a little bit lower, but in reality, I think our teachers are going to do an outstanding job of managing those class sizes. Our highest distance learning enrollments come from Lake Agassiz. They have 38% of their enrollment in distance learning, 164 students. Century is next with 27%, or 114 students. And I won't go through all 12 schools, but the lowest distance learning enrollments are Kelly at 8%. 39 students participate in distance learning at Kelly, and Discovery West has 72 students, or 13%. And we asked Emily for an update on child nutrition and the meals for our distance learning families. So starting on August 31st through September 10th, last Thursday, she had provided almost 700 meals to families, and those meals are now being able to be picked up at the students' home school, so they don't have to go to a site. They can actually go to the home school setting. That's all I had. I'll turn over to Catherine. I'll try to answer any questions you guys might have. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. As far as the secondary update goes, I want to start from the building level, the face-to-face. As mentioned by Dr. Brenner and Mr. Thompson, the safety protocols that we wondered about really have been a non-issue. In fact, across the board, people have been pleasantly surprised, and those safety protocols have really paid off in the end when it's come to things like close contact tracing. I do have to send a shout out to the attention to detail paid to the spacing, to the masking, to the safety protocols. It's really prevented us from having to take mass quantities of students and staff. I'm going to keep using the word offline, but really it would be online because they might be switching to virtual learning, but moving them out of the building because of being identified as close contact. So I have to, that has really been minimized because of the structures that we have in place, and I couldn't be prouder of our staff for making sure that they're paying attention to those protocols and continuing that into the future. Priorities that we talked about were established, so building relationships and social emotional learning is priority area 1. Those tech competencies at the classroom level, we've been teaching students who are in front of us how to use their technology skills better in case they have to shift to online or remote learning. We talked about not being able to do that last March, which was something that we wanted to invest in right away just in case. And then now wading into the curriculum and the standards and the assessment piece. The staff has been absolutely amazing. I can't tell you how many emails I receive from teachers saying thank you and families saying thank you and just rolling up their sleeves and figuring out all kinds of new models and new protocols. And there has been no problem that has gone really unsolved because people just are jumping in and figuring things out. So I have to give a shout out across the board. Lots of successes. So we found some successes in the scheduling, some advantages to the hybrid scheduling that I've heard from students is that they really like it. It seems more relaxed. It seems like they can get more attention when they're in class. And the at-home day, they like some of the flexibility. I think some of them, perhaps in a household such as mine, might be struggling a little bit with the schedule, the off day, but figuring it out in the end. And the principals have been attuned to the students there, and they seem to have a very positive regard for that hybrid schedule. And at the middle level, I've actually had some people comment on the fact that we might want to continue with this block schedule. There are actually great advantages there as far as, again, giving more time to dig into learning instead of feeling like they're rushing around all the time. So those really big stressors when we ask people to completely revamp their master schedule at the start of the year have paid some dividends in a wide variety of ways. And I think as the year goes on, those ways will grow when it comes to the teaching and learning practices as well. I want to read you a little ditty, if I may, although I know we're on a time schedule here, but this is a vignette that came from one of the instructional coaches to the principals at Valley, and I think it's worthwhile for you to hear. It says, "I've been in and out of classrooms all morning, and I'm blown away by the instruction happening in our building. New teachers, veteran teachers, everyone in between. Teachers have the space, class sizes, mix of kids, and whatever else it is to teach this year, and it feels so good. Solid learning, assessment, and smiles, under masks, of course, is happening within our walls, and it is beyond refreshing. Formative checks for understanding are happening, structured learning is happening, unstructured learning is happening. Providing kids with opportunities to discuss and think critically within this space is happening. It is amazing. I am so encouraged by who we have leading our classrooms, our teams in our building. Thank you for the countless hours and conversations the two of you put in behind the scenes to make all of this happen." So I think that's just one, again, vignette, which I think was worthwhile to share with you all tonight about the face-to-face. Some bumps getting into routines. I think Mr. Thompson noticed that. Some of the refinements in the busing schedules, those are still being retooled to make sure that we're getting students to school on time. We're a little bit concerned and need to monitor as the weather gets colder about how those fluctuations and numbers might go. And then we know that once school gets rolling and those assessments come in, that we may have to really dig into some more interventions with students. Last year when we went home in March, the national studies said to anticipate a larger learning gap and skill gap in the academics. And so that's something that we're just starting to dip our toe into now. As far as the virtual academy goes, we have 684 6th through 12th grade students enrolled in the virtual academy out of the 4,213 at the secondary level overall. The highest enrollment there is Grand Forks Central. There are 218 students. Jody didn't tell me he was going to break it down into percentages. That wily guy should have followed suit. Lowest enrollment is Schrader Middle School that has 63 students, grades 6 through 8, enrolled in the virtual academy. Same priorities were established there the first couple of weeks, building relationships and social emotional learning. those technical competency skills, and then getting into the curriculum. There was some misunderstanding about, I think some people expected that on the first day of school, it was going to be academics right out the chute because we could just flip on that switch, but that wasn't what students needed then. And so we did take some time and kind of slowed that roll, and I had some parents actually reach out to me and say thank you for that. I was misunderstanding what to expect, and it does make sense, the approach that you took, so I'm hoping that that is still the sentiment in the households there. Our staff there has also been amazing, in both our virtual staff and our building level supports. Jody mentioned the CIT department. Kent Rimplinger, Deb Koopman, Amy Barch, Eric, Lorraine O'Shea, Jesse Erickson, all of them have been pivotal resources for our online academy teachers. And then at the building level, our counselors, our teachers who are stepping up to help out and support students, our building admins, they are not thinking of the virtual academy kids as those kids. They are still our kids. And their biggest point of consternation is how do we keep those kids connected to our home brick and mortar school? And that's a huge, beautiful mentality that they're going into this with. Successes, I've heard from a handful of parents about the fact that they really are appreciating their online teachers and the positivity and the energy in the organization. There have been some bumps in the road as those teachers learned all of these new platforms and how to execute them well. So some teachers had a faster start than others, admittedly, but I think we're all on pace right now. And as far as next steps go, we know that we have to bolster some of our supports. It is becoming growingly evident how much we rely on that teacher right there all of the time to answer our questions. So our students who are in some of our most accelerated courses, we need to get them some additional support. And we're working some collaborative relationships with UND to bring in some additional tutors and that sort of thing. And then some of our students who are struggling students. There are some students that we are already worried about because it seems like they're not as engaged as we want them to be. So we're working in coordination with building teams to try to engage those students to make sure that they're not backsliding. And I want to thank the board for supporting the investment in the virtual academy hires. As he mentioned, some of the other districts, I think, are doing what they need to for their district, and it's a great model for them. For us, I feel like this is allowing our teachers who are in the brick and mortar to concentrate on those kids in front of them, and that's really important. And our teachers who are in the virtual academy to concentrate on the kids who are in the virtual academy, equally important, and that makes the tasks manageable and doable, and hopefully in the end excellent. So I will now entertain questions, or Mr. Thompson is here as well.
Any questions for Mr. Thompson or Ms. Galach? Jeff?
I've heard some comments from the public that students on their home day or their remote learning days had some light classwork, if any at all. So for me and for those other members of the public that are wondering, could you go over what a remote day would look like, what the expectations are of the students?
Certainly. My guess is just by that feedback, Mr. Manley, that it might still be a little bit variable as teachers are figuring out how to really coordinate the day on and the day off. Some teachers, and I'm going to speak again from the observations in my household, some teachers are really counting on that time and putting forth really robust modules. But they are, and then they're taking advantage of the face-to-face time to answer the questions and to do the hands-on components. And other teachers, I think, are really taking advantage of the teaching time and using that home time for more of a reinforcement, which might feel lighter. Does that make sense when I just frame it that way? And so I guess to respond to your question, there were a couple of different pedagogical approaches they could take, and one was what I described in the former part of that sentiment, which was to try to do the instructional, it's called a flipped classroom, where kids are learning at home and coming in and taking care of all of the Q&A and the hands-on, and then the converse of that. I think as time goes on here, meaning I think kids have been in school maybe face-to-face 4 to 5 days as of today, and at home that many days as well. As teachers get the flow and receive feedback from students, which I know is happening, I think the balance will come better in the end. So if you're still hearing that down the line, I would want them to be in conversation at the building level so that the teachers know how to balance that better.
Chris?
Thank you. As you address this, two thoughts come to mind. Those students that say are doing the virtual academy, typically some of those students at the high school level may choose that route because they don't want to be in school or it's a requirement. So the attendance piece with those students, managing that and assuring that they're continuing to grow their credits, because without credits, there's no graduation. Then we know there's a number of ways they can eventually reach there if necessary. So if you could address that. And then secondly, special education, perhaps in particular the autism classrooms, for example. How are those faculty and staff and the students, how have they been with that thus far, if you would please? Thank you.
Yeah, as for the attendance, you're spot on there, Mr. Douthit, is that for some of our high school students, quite honestly, and in fact, we just received an email today for a request to go online so that the student can help out at home. There is a fair amount of that I don't think people understand. When I think about this model going forward and some of the ways that we might be able to actually help more students towards graduation, for some of those students who have family obligations, this model seems to be working well, and there are a fair amount of them that jumped into that are working full-time jobs, some of them 1.5 jobs, some of them 2 full-time jobs. And so our teachers are really retooling and taking a look at what attendance means there. Attendance for them means they're making progress in their classes. Attendance there means they're communicating when they can't be part of those synchronous sessions, and they're then taking those students and pairing them up into study partners or reaching out to them individually afterwards to make sure they're connected to school. So attendance is a little bit different as far as how it's measured at the high school level. Easier for the middle school because they're all kind of lock and step together, but there are some nuances there that they're working through. And I will assure you that the counselors and the associate principals and the principals are working hand in glove with the teachers there to make sure that any early flags, warning flags are already being delved into to assure kids are keeping pace. As far as the special supports go, I think that it's not only for students who may be on IEPs, but students who may need EL support or, like I mentioned before, acceleration supports. There are still some components being worked out there. I do know that we have teams across the district of special educators. Some of them are assigned exclusively to serve our online students. Some of them are spending hours of their day where they're working on the skills, the IEP skills with online students, and the rest of the day they're working brick and mortar with the other students on their caseload. The EL teachers are in support and collaboration with the online teachers to build those into the supports at home. So that is there's a system in place. It's still continuing to be worked on so that it works really well in the end. So that's kind of the best I can update you on at this point.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
Before I say anything, some of my questions might sound negative, but I'm not negative, okay? I mean, I think the district is really trying hard, but could you remind us, please, of what the minimum amount of time for elementary students are to be online? So kind of in my frame, I'm receiving questions, comments from some, kind of what Jeff talked about, which is the variability of being busy and having enough at home for some elementary. And then I am receiving some comments, and I actually witnessed a family all online. The other day I was in someone's home, and it was the cutest thing. It's a big family, 7 in their family, and 3 of the kids are in school, and they were all at desks in their separate rooms doing online, and they were on Zoom, and they wanted me to see it. So that was a very positive, but I am getting questions about some people saying to me, it's 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, and that was it. And so what was, and I know we have a document, so I apologize, what is the minimum amount of time that elementary students should be?
So maybe I can answer that question by reading you the schedule that we have established for the elementary students. So at 8:30 to 9 o'clock, it's class meetings, so think about homeroom. It occurs the same in a distance learning classroom. We expect students to be online in their Zoom meeting. From 8:30 to 9, there's usually an activity that the teacher follows up with to get kids engaged and ready to learn. And then from 9 to 9:15, we give them a little break and get them ready for the first live lesson of the day, and that's 9:15 to 10 o'clock. And that's when the teacher will teach language arts, math, science, or social studies. Then from 10 to 11, the students work independently on whatever assigned work there is, so that would be independent time. However, the teacher will work with small groups of students or one-on-one if there are kids that need some extra attention. Then from 10 to 11, did I say 10 to 11? Sorry, 11:15 to 11:45, that's their specialist time, so that's music, PE, counseling time, library, Spanish, keyboarding, art. So that's their block of time for specials. Then from 11:45 to 1:15, it's lunch and their recess break. And again, getting them ready for their afternoon live lesson, which is 1:15 to 2 o'clock, so another 45-minute block. Same thing, the teacher is available from 2 to 2:30. Students work independently, but he or she can work with students in one-to-one lessons or in small group. 2:30 is the end of the day, and then teachers have their office hours and planning time from 2:30 to 3:55. So I think maybe what you might be hearing, because we eased into the academics, maybe there's not enough content for some of our families, but I can tell you I've not had any complaints from parents about too much or too little. It seems to have been just right. And again, this week we start amping up our expectations for curriculum.
Oh, I remember that schedule, and I've got that. So if I am hearing this, what should I do? Should I tell the parents? Because this is what I've told them, this schedule, and they're saying this isn't happening in these few cases. So it wasn't about content, it was more about they didn't have anything going on.
Yep.
So maybe they're not connected correctly, maybe they're missing something, but what do you think? Contact the,
Well, the first point of contact is always the classroom teacher.
okay,
The second point of contact would be the building administrator, whoever their home school principal is, and then the next contact would be me. I will tell you that a kindergarten teacher's day might look a little bit different. They might break up that 45-minute block into a 20 and a 25 throughout the day. So we've given them some flexibility depending on the age of their students. I don't know if kindergarten students can focus for 45 minutes, to be honest with you. So those teachers might be breaking it up a little bit, but the expectation is at the end of the day, they're getting that live lesson somehow, some way.
can I ask another question, or may I? What about, completely pivoting now to middle school, what about masks? You've said people are pretty supportive of masks, Dr. Brenner mentioned that. What about at the middle school level? There were several of us who received concerns about students wearing masks in the middle school, not necessarily appreciating that. In fact, when I was driving here, somebody made lots of fun of me in the car because I had my masks on. I realized I was saying, I'm going to a meeting, and of course, they couldn't hear me or read my lips, but they were like pointing, hilarious, I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
When I've had conversations with the middle level principals, they have said there have been very few to no issues or concerns or even complaints about masks. I've heard about 2 students who were talked to about it. That's really all they've reported to me. So if there's a bigger issue than that, I'm unaware of it. So you can maybe take this offline with me if there's something I need to dig into more deeply.
I just want to follow up since I am a parent of a kindergartner who's in distance learning, and I'll say the first 2 weeks were light on curriculum content, but thank God they were, because there was so much technical stuff you had to learn how to access, and it was really just figuring out what button to push and what link and teaching the kids how to use the different tools. So in my house, it was light, but it's the first week of kindergarten after a really long time being home, so it was good that it was eased into. And I also want to say I appreciate the flexibility that's being given to at least the teachers I've talked to at that elementary and distance learning level, because they are working really hard to try to accommodate 23 different families with, different schedules. One thing that was expressed was that the assessments have been a little bit harder to get through in the online, which I can understand, but I took the time out to sit with my kid as she went through her assessments, and I got to tell you, as a parent, it was completely eye-opening to the things that we can work on with her, and it was really helpful to participate in that. So I appreciated the distance learning in that context, as it gave me an insight into, developmental progress and what things can my kid do and what do we need to help her with. So from that standpoint, it's been really good. And then I was just going to echo one of the other things that I sent some questions to Dr. Brenner and ahead of the meeting and got some good answers back. But one of the other concerns that I don't know where the break in the chain of communication is, but on the cleaning, I know there was a communication that went out about wipes and going through those supplies too quickly. But there was reference to mystery spray showing up in the class, like a spray bottle showing up in the classroom, and it wasn't labeled or identified in advance. And so I think there's maybe a miscommunication there, or just there was a breakdown in communication with buildings and grounds or cleaning and what the solution was. And I think it made some people nervous to use it, and they didn't know how to use it. And so just wanted to bring that up because that was something I heard multiple different times, and I think it's been clarified at this point, but just going forward to keep that communication is going to be really important for teachers. And then I think I got the same email that Cynthia referenced about at the middle school, but it not entirely surprising, you know, middle school kids maybe not making the best judgment call. Who knew? But from what I've heard at the high school level too, I have to say I think most of the high school kids have really enjoyed being back in class with their friends, and I think they're a little bit anxious about what the rest of the year is going to look like and social events that may or may not happen. I had one question just out of curiosity on the fans at the football game. I was interested to hear what their most persuasive argument was for fan attendance, just out of curiosity.
Well, I had sent a video out to middle and high school students on Tuesday of the week leading up to the Cushman Classic, explaining why we couldn't have fans in the stands, and talked about CDC guidelines, and really it was supposed to be a graceful and tactful message regarding we want to keep the season going, the fall season going, we want to keep our students in session, and we want to get our winter sports started. So anything we might do to jeopardize that would be putting too many fans in the stands. So when I met with the students, when I got to Central in the afternoon after I met with Red River, one of the students said, well, I'm always looking for a loophole. And so I asked him to explain the loophole. He said, well, what if we weren't in the stands? Because we really were worried that kids were going to congregate around the fence. And then we have no control over that. They're on our property, and we certainly, we didn't want to have any negative experiences for any of our students or adults who were supervising, or SROs for that matter. And so they talked about setting up chairs on the beyond the end zones in the north and south end, and each school would have X amount of chairs. You know, they didn't really specify an amount at that point. And I said, well, that, you know, it is a large stadium, so we're not having everybody in the stands. Let me do some checking with public health. Let me do some checking with the North Dakota High School Activity Association to make sure we're not in violation of anything that would put 2 high school football teams at risk for forfeiture. And so I got the thumbs up from both groups who I talked to. And so we determined that 70 seats spaced out with 6 feet in between those chairs would work well. And the chairs would be kind of an anchor for their spot. Not that they had to sit in their chair, but that's their spot. So we communicated that out, and high school leadership did a fantastic job of creating a Google Doc where they, and it was seniors, we prioritized seniors first. And from what I understand, those tickets went pretty quickly when that portal opened up at 3 o'clock on Thursday. So I went to the game, and I was in the north end zone with the central section, and this never happened in 26 years when I used to be an official, a basketball official. Never. I was called a lot of things, but this never happened. The central section started cheering, "Thank you, Brenner. Thank you, Brenner. Thank you, Brenner." And that's probably never going to happen again, by the way. So I just wish I would have had it recorded. But the kids were great. There were expectations stated of them. Here's what we need you to do during the game. And we even had a message to our head coaches to let the student athletes know, if you, hey, Red River kid, if you score a touchdown in front of the central section, don't do an NFL thing. You know, don't do any showboating. And they didn't. And everybody stayed apart. I would say the only hiccup was, and we told the kids at the end of the game, regardless of who wins, don't rush the field. And they didn't. We just forgot to tell the winning team, don't rush to your fan section. So there's a little bit of moment there where I just kind of went, I hope nobody's breathing right now, because nobody had a mask on at that point. But that was the other thing. They kept their masks on most of the game unless they were cheering. So that was the bridge that they built, and they wanted to work with administration, and I just give them all the credit in the world, and it was a good experience for me, and I think it was a good experience for them.
I had a chance to listen to some students on the radio about that decision as well, and it was eye-opening to me, especially when you say young adults and not high school students. There was a couple seniors from each school, and they really emphasized, the radio DJ said, "What are you hearing from your fellow peers? What are you hearing from your students?" And they said, we all know that if we want to have a semi-normal year and have activities or dances at some point or prom or graduation, that we have to follow those guidelines and we have to do our best and lead by example. And I was really impressed by those two individuals, those student athletes, to say that, we're going to hold each other accountable, and this almost becomes the new norm. So if you're not masked up or if you're acting like a fool, you're kind of on the outside of what the norm is. So I appreciated that. I will echo Shannon's sentiments, just being a parent to a elementary school student. I very much appreciated the kind of roll into distance learning. There was a lot to take in, figuring out the different platforms and assessments and, getting to know your fellow classmates in a different way. And to Cynthia's question too, I've gotten certain families who have asked questions or had concerns, and I think part of it was the assumption that it was going to look very similar to in-person learning right away. You get started, you're going through the motions of class, but what I've heard from some parents is, it's not the distance learning schedule that is probably the barrier at our household. It's the fact that I am working and trying to manage, a kid's schedule, or we share the same space. So when she wants to talk and when I'm talking, we have some differences there. And so I think part of it is familial situations, trying to figure out how do we operate this new distance. But at the same time, has been super eye-opening, like Shannon said, to we don't really get to be there when they're doing their assessments normally. So the fact that the teacher sort of invited me in the background in some ways and is able to participate in that, it gives you a different insight into how teachers teach, and it's a different process, but it's a really cool thing to be a part of. So I know that there's going to be hiccups along the way, and I think that everyone's situation should be, approached and should be figured out. And so I appreciate the channel of communication as well to be able to funnel people through, to help figure out those different individual circumstances. We are past 6:30, but definitely want to give time if there's other questions to consider for the school reopening update. Dr. Lon?
Just I've heard lots of great comments. So Jody and Catherine, take that back to your teams. I've heard a lot of positive things. There is one group that is really suffering, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, and that's all the dogs that are now home alone that had their siblings with them for 5 months. I know a lot of families comment about the dogs acting quite strange with no kids, no parents home, but I don't think you can fix that, but if you can, let me know.
So I had one comment, and it's not a criticism, but I know Amy Barch sent me, I'd asked a while back about how we're going to help parents in a distance learning setting kind of know expectations of them, or at least help them in helping their kids. And she had sent me a really cool page snap of something that was going to go out, I thought, to parents with like all these different, you could click on all these different icons and it would take you to resources like mindfulness. And some of the things, I know Jody sent an email out to most, I think it was all distance parents today, just about the responsibility we have to transition our kid to get ready for learning. And, just a link or something a little bit more than, hey, the expectation is this, but how you can help them do that. I mean, I went and researched how to do that, but to kind of put that in parents' lap would be helpful. And that page Amy sent me looked really, really easy to understand. So I don't know when that will go out, but I'm looking forward to more of that for parents.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just Mrs. Bucup, if you have anything that you've heard from GFEA members, or do I call you North Dakota United or whichever, but do you have any feedback you'd like to provide us?
I think once we've gotten into it, people are feeling a little more comfortable. We had a lot coming back with cleaning and wipes, and Chris Arnold put a nice thing together that we sent out to our members to explain to them about the different cleaning processes and how to use the different things and what are recommended for students to use and what the students can't use. So since that has gone out, I haven't really heard much back about that, so I'm hoping that was very helpful to people. We also put out a survey to our members just asking how they were feeling safety-wise after their first week back. 50% of our members filled out the survey, and we gave them 1 to 10, with 1 feeling not safe and 10 feeling very safe. And so 1 to 2 was 5%, 3 to 4, 8%, 5 to 6, 14%, 7 to 8, 43%, and 9 to 10, 30%. So about 73% of our members are feeling pretty safe when they're back at work. Lots of questions have come back up with the process of close contacts and what we can and cannot know. So I think that's just, I'm trying to get as much information out to them as possible on how that process works, and that we don't get to know everything. We just can know what you need to know, which is hard. But I think as the process goes along and stuff, we'll ease into it more and have just more understanding of the process.
Thank you.
Dr. Brenner, before we move on, do you want to comment just for the record about sort of the need to know close contacts, student records, et cetera? Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine, and I understand Melissa's sentiment completely. As a matter of fact, up until just last Friday, the people who would be considered our non-disclosure agreement folks, we had a total of 5 in the district, and we were just overwhelmed with the amount of work to try to assist public health with contact tracing. So we have now enlisted the support of building level principals, lead principals, and also their closest confidant, administrative assistant, to help with that process. And because what was happening, for example, was there might be an athlete who was diagnosed COVID positive, and the coach might know, and the coach might not be part of our system, and the athlete hasn't been contacted yet by public health, or the close contacts haven't been contacted, and then we've got kids in school who maybe shouldn't be in school. So we think this is going to streamline things. I think it already has streamlined things from a weekend workload perspective. Sorry, I'm fogging up here. And so we have we've gotten advisement from our local attorneys, Dick Olson and Laura Cobb, along with the North Dakota School Board Association attorney, that we need to follow in particular, our one policy, our significant contagious disease policy. And that would be a pretty good backdrop or a framework of why we wouldn't want to notify, why we wouldn't want to list numbers. The people, I'll say this, the people who need to know will know. If we close down a classroom at a school, people who are close contacts to that situation will know. Actually, when they show up at work, they're going to know, gee, we're missing a classroom today. But for us, it's more than risky at this point to put out COVID numbers, student-related numbers, because there is a degree of identifiable information if somebody drills down to a specific building, in particular, perhaps a small elementary school, and then finds out what program it might be in that school. Now we have identifiable information. So we're just being extremely cautious. I know some school districts, Bismarck, for example, has a dashboard where they're putting out their student numbers, their staff numbers, their close contact, their identified positive cases, not by name, but in total number. And we explored that, and we're just under advisement not to do that. And I know that feels a little uneasy to our public. We're not trying to withhold information. If somebody would give me the green light and say, go ahead and announce your numbers, we would announce the numbers. We are just trying to follow our own policy and the recommendations made by legal counsel. So I hope that adds a little clarity instead of more ambiguity.
Any last questions? Go ahead.
But I wanted to read what I heard from Chris Arnold to address that wipes, because they really have done a lot to work on it. Just, this was September 11th. They received, they had well over 2,000 canisters of wipes that they went through so quickly. So now on that day, September 11th, they received 2,000 more canisters with an additional 5,000 wipes coming this week. So they are going back to wipes, it's my understanding, and not using the hydrogen peroxide-based cleaner spray bottles that were used. So it was they knew what it was. So, I mean, I got a very clear message that they're following CDC guidelines and that we are doing all the right things. I think we need to make sure that people know that so that they feel safe.
Other questions? Okay, we'll move on to summer school updates. I believe we'll just go right into Mr. Onstead. We'll skip all the introductions. You've been here before, so.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thanks for having us this evening. You all know probably that I do our elementary summer school program, and this looked much different this year, as you would probably guess. So I just want to address some of the things that we did differently rather than reiterating all the numbers I sent you. You can see that we had to cancel our math program, and we chose to do Introduction to Kindergarten and reading in that July to August range, 3-week session. You can see the numbers. Of course, we expected our enrollment numbers to decrease with math being canceled, but I was pleasantly surprised that we were able to put 704 kids in a face-to-face setting before we really kicked off our school year. And I think what it did was it started to settle the fear a little bit and the anxiety of a lot of other people that we were actually able to pull that off in that 3-week session. Our summer school staff were able to report out to their elementary colleagues when we were back in our PD sessions prior to school year starting. We had our elementary summer school staff report out on lessons that they've learned and takeaways from the first 15 days of face-to-face instruction with elementary students. And probably the biggest thing that I've heard resounding from you and from the community is that masks weren't an issue. They weren't an issue in summer school either. And if anything, it was a pleasant surprise that, I think this whole mask anxiety can pretty much be minimized because it's just expected, and it takes a little bit of way of, do I or don't I? You just do, and you go with it. And so, of course, they weren't all day. These were half-day sessions. Our teacher-to-student ratio was much less than what we typically would do, so we tried to have 12 or less students in a classroom. There were a few, like Dr. Brenner mentioned, a few, classrooms with maybe a couple more than that, but most of them were less than 12 in a classroom. And a lot of times with a couple of adults as well in there. So we were trying to stay under 15 with adults and students counted in those classrooms. That went really well. Some of those classrooms were smaller than that, actually. We had, obviously, a number of staff hired. I pulled some numbers just to share with you. We had 28 Introduction to Kindergarten teachers hired for the district, and we had 45 remedial reading teachers hired for the district, which is a total of 73 staff members hired for that 704 kids enrolled in those 2 programs. Just a reminder to the board, Introduction to Kindergarten is a school board, school district funded program. It is not reimbursable by the state, but our remedial reading is a reimbursable summer school program that we submit for reimbursement from the state. And I would entertain any questions you might have about elementary summer school. I also want to just say a quick thank you to all of the secretaries and principals that helped the hiring process, helped the management process during those 3 weeks, because it was different this year with having 2 sessions when they're starting to get back into the routine of planning for COVID-19. They were more than gracious to have our summer school programs running from July 27th to August 14th, and I really appreciate their support in managing this program, because obviously we can't do this with one person.
Any questions for Mr. Onset?
Not directed necessarily at you, just in general. I like to look at things longitudinally, and some of these reports have the past 2 or 3 years. But I think it's nice to look at what's happened the last few years and stuff. And rather than buried in a paragraph, it's nice to actually have it in a graph. Now, this year is going to be an anomaly probably
Right.
at all the levels. But it's nice to look at what's been going on the last few years. Are we up in this or down in this? And I know some of you have got that information there, but not. So it's not just directed you, it's just a general comment.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Chris?
A comment, Mr. Onstead and Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Bohan, and Mr. Wilbur. I recall receiving an email from Ms. Galach stating that there was no summer for administration. And on top of that, you had to prepare for summer school with an unknown. And so as I read through these reports and saw the perseverance, the professionalism, the true care of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, SPA, oh my goodness, what a show this year, what you were put through, and just the whole summer school piece and everything that was involved, and where things would fall apart and have to be put back together. You truly have to be applauded, and Mr. Onstead, I appreciate the way you attribute the work of others as well. Yet you, being the leads, have truly got to be recognized for your diligence to the task and knowing that there's a job to be done and you're going to do it. So to the 4 of you, I say thank you so very much for your efforts.
On behalf of all of them, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments?
These are easy questions. Just keep those coming to my way. I like your questions.
Well,
Save the hard ones for the 3 colleagues that are coming up next. Good, thank you.
Mr. Onset, before you leave, while I'm wearing a plain mask, I am wearing red, white, and blue today to support the New York Giants. So good luck, sir.
She notices my Steelers mask, obviously, so as soon as I slip out the side door, I'll text you the score. And actually, when I came to the podium, Amber, it was 3-3.
Good luck.
Thank my son for that one.
I guess, are we up next with whoever wants to come up? Mr. Wilbur?
All right, so this is my first time doing this, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike Wilbur. I'm an associate principal over at Grand Forks Central High School. Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Interesting summer to get dropped into this, but had a lot of good support going through, and we were able to make it. So with the high school, we decided to keep the summer school session at the same time parameters that we would under normal conditions. So we went from June 1st through July 7th, 26 total days. School day was made up from 7:45 a.m. to 12:25 p.m., total of 4 hours and 40 minutes, broken up into 2 blocks, essentially, of 2 hours and 15 minutes with a 10-minute break in between. We had 24 teachers that we ended up hiring and 12 paras. Vast majority of our students that come to us at the high school level are taking courses so that they can basically give themselves more alternatives for electives and those types of things. But then we also have a remedial portion as well with math, science, and also all of our English is offered for students. All told, we had 534 students sign up for high school summer school, which is actually an increase compared to what we've had in past years, especially considering that this year we didn't actually open up summer school for people outside of our district to take the classes, just to try to keep our numbers down. We had 901 enrolled seats, so some students can take one credit class, or they can take 2 half-credit classes for a total of 901 enrolled seats. Our most popular classes at the high school level were Global Ed with 5 one-credit sections and Physical Education with 5 half-credit sections being offered. All total, we did 14 different classes delivered with 29 total sections. Attendance is a real trick at the high school level. Obviously with credits being involved, typically over the course of a semester, we're going to meet 90 days during a school year. Full year is going to be 180 days. And so in summer school, we're going and doing that same amount of work in 26 days. And so it's really important for us for attendance purposes to make sure that students are coming. And that's quite a trick when you go online because the parameters are different. And so what we ended up doing was we just calculated out under normal summer school conditions, a student can miss 10 hours for a 1 credit class or 5 hours for a half credit class, which total is about 8% of the total time. And so when we built the online schedule, in our early morning block, we had 1 hour of a Zoom session. And then in our mid-morning block, we had 1 hour of a Zoom session. And so for if you're taking a half credit class, you're going to have 26 Zoom sessions over the course of the summer school session, or 52 if you take a 1 credit class. And so what we figured was, well, why don't we do 8% of that? All right, you can miss 8% of those Zoom sessions. And so when you do the math on it, if you're taking a half credit class, you can miss 2 Zoom sessions. And so we kind of scratched our heads and thought, with all the variability of being online, probably want to have a little grace. And so we ended up doing 3 Zoom sessions for a half credit class and 6 Zoom sessions for a full credit class. And the first week was, as you'd probably expect, people are calling in and panicking because they know there are these parameters and what am I going to do because I can't get online. And so that first week we were really gracious with people and we said, here's our tech support line number. The expectation is we have to get this figured out by the end of the week. And then we're really going to start sticking to this that second week. And so that was fine. And then we still had things that came up. We had a couple of power outages where people couldn't get their Wi-Fi. And so that second week, what we did was we basically just set up parameters for people to work within. So we said, okay, here's how this is going to go. If you can't get online, the key is you got to communicate with us during the Zoom session. All right, and there's 2 ways that you can do that. One way would be to email your teacher, but if you don't have Wi-Fi, that can be problematic. And the second way is to call the school and talk to the secretary, and then we'll make a timestamp of your name and what class you're in, and we'll notify the teacher. And as long as you communicated to us during that Zoom session, we'll work with you on it. And that actually worked really well for us. We still had some students that we lost because of the attendance requirements, but that's no different than any other year. Total number for us was we dropped 77 seats. Now realize that 1 student could count for 2 seats if they're in 2 half credit classes. That was about 9% of our total seats. In the past, and you guys have the numbers in front of you, but 2019 we were at 6%, 2018 we were at 6%, 2017 we were at 7%. So we were a little bit high, but being online, there's that variability of having that happen. We also had 26 seats that didn't earn credit because of failing grades. But here's the part that I think I'm most proud of. 798 full or half credits were earned by summer school students over the session. So that's quite a number. And I just want to take a moment to thank our lead secretary, Lee Olson, who works at Central. She is dynamite and just such a great resource because she's done this before and she could help work through a lot of things. I also like to thank Mr. Conrad. Scott Conrad is a technology person out at Thompson, but used to teach in our district, taught English at Central. And he is a whiz with spreadsheets and helps with the registration process, gets everything organized for us for attendance. It's one of the beautiful things for us in summer school is we update families at the end of every single day, how they're doing. So if a student is late to a class, a tardy is 20 minutes, by 2 o'clock that day, their parents and that student are getting a notification saying, your student was tardy for class today. There's 20 minutes gone. Here's how many total minutes they have left before they're dropped from the class. So every single day we communicate so there's no surprises, and that's also critical for us for success. So that's been a really good thing, and Mr. Conrad is kind of the brains behind that. So I want to make sure I acknowledge him. And then also Dr. Gabe Dahl, who is the person that was in this position for the last 8 years. I have him right down the hallway, and he is such a great resource on many things, but summer school in particular, he was just a great asset and a great help for me, so I want to make sure I mention his name as well. For the middle school, this was a really interesting thing for us. We went online for high school and we kept it the same that it always had been. For middle school, we followed kind of Kevin Onstead and the elementary's lead, and we decided that, we talked to the middle school principals and they said, we've always talked about this, let's try it this year. Usually they do it in June. They decided to do it in late July. So we started July 27th and went through August 14th, just like the elementary. School day is from 8 a.m. to noon. We have classes from 8 to 10 and then from 10 to 12. We offer remedial math and reading to students grades 6 through 8. We had 8 teachers that were hired and 9 paras. I included in the packet for you guys the enrollment and completion tables from 2020, and you can compare those to other years. Our numbers were down a little bit in the middle school, but they were actually up a little bit in the EL program, so that was kind of nice to see. Some parameters that we had to work within, restricted section sizes of 15 people or fewer. Our biggest class was over at Schrader. We had 12 students, a teacher and a para, so we got 14. That was as close to 15 as we got. We decided that we were going to move teachers, not classes. And so if I'm Nikki Polam at South Middle School teaching reading in room 307, and I've got those kids from 8 to 10, and then there's other kids that are over in a math class. When the switch happens, we switch the teachers. We didn't switch the students. So Nikki would leave room 307 at South and go to room 301. We also encouraged them, obviously, to keep really good attendance, seating charts, and then also the cohorts that they were grouping kids in needed to stay consistent and static. Masks available at the door, hand sanitizers. It was just a good soft opening for us. And I think we got a good feel for what were the things that were working and what were some of the things that weren't working. In terms of recommendations for next year, I think the biggest thing that we need to figure out is at the middle school level and what the preferred time period is that we're going to be offering middle school, summer school. I surveyed our staff and it was split right down the middle, which is super helpful, right? But also want to talk to our middle school admin and of course Assistant Superintendent Glatch, and we'll figure that out. So that's all I have for you guys. Any questions for me? Dr. Lund?
I believe you're one of two newbies up here tonight, so we got to ask you the tough questions.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I just have one question for you.
Yeah.
Kara Milliner at Valley, so you're not used to the middle school. She had 9 students registered, yet 12 of them completed the course. How did that happen?
Well, listen, Todd Selk called me once we got started, and he said, if we have room, can we add kids? And I said, absolutely, because our numbers were a little bit down at Valley. So we're not going to deny a student an opportunity to come in and get additional help with reading or math if we have space. And the nice thing at Valley is we were over at the library, and plenty of space to spread kids out. And so we ended up, I think our number was like 133% increase our completion rate. So that one looks really good compared to some of the other ones. So, but you know, it's at South we had parents that were some parents that were concerned about sending their kids based on what was going on in the community. And so they had registered, and our deadline to register, I think it was June 1st for the middle school students. And so they pulled their students out, which we understand. And then we had some other families that wanted to add. So we just worked with them and got it done. Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Wilbur? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. Mr. Bohan?
Good evening, members of the board. Driver's ed in 2020 was different. It was unusual. It wasn't the same as it had been, yet it went just fine. A couple of variables that we tackled were the solo driving concept, just having an individual student with an individual instructor in a car. That generally went pretty well. Took some scheduling and some creativity on staff members' parts, but it went just fine. Some students had to do some canceling from time to time. There were some intricacies that we had to work through, but in the end it did work just fine. The classroom portion, the vast majority of our 249 students for driver's ed this summer completed it in a remote format, distance format. We did have a section of 48 students in the month of July who did complete driver's ed face-to-face. A few things we learned. Number one, kids like being around one another. Don't forget that. Number two, and probably most importantly for me, teachers like being around students. It was a vitamin C jolt to see 12 students walk into one classroom and 12 walk into another. That is a lesson that I learned from driver's ed this summer. Students drove 24,000 miles, just under 24,000 miles. So our total miles driven this year is the same as what it typically has been, for that volume of students anyway. We certainly appreciate Rydell Motors and the vehicle arrangement we have with them. We cannot do driver's ed without them, and we certainly appreciate their partnership. We are working to secure additional driver's ed instructors. In the 2019-2020 year, we did increase our staff by 2. We are in the process of hopefully increasing that in 2021, 3 additional staff. which would get our certified driver's ed staff somewhere around 16, 19 staff members, which I believe can increase our volume of students served to where it used to be approximately 5 to 7 years ago in the neighborhood of 300, 320, 330 students. Driver's ed was different in 2020. We learned some things. We think it could be back to what it used to be in 21. We certainly hope that it can be, but in general, it went well. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Bohan? Go ahead.
So it surprised me when you said one-on-one. Is it usually like a loaded car with kids and one kid driving with one instructor?
Partner driving is usually what occurs, and that's a key part of the program. Behind the wheel is the observation time. So as Shannon is driving, Terry observes, and there's a switch with the instructor leading most of it. So our driving needs to be observed as well. It is a requirement. We had to work through some of those glitches with observation time. But yes, you have a partner driver.
I think what Shannon's envisioning is like the typical like cruising Washington setting for the driver, like playing the music, yelling in the background. Like, do they throw distractions at the student? So, which might serve as an educational opportunity. I don't know. Other questions about driver's ed?
Done the riding along, it's very controlled. There's no talking and no cell phone usage. It's very controlled.
Good. Other questions about driver's ed? Mr. Bohan, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, and I'm pivoting away from our agenda, but when we got to announcements, I wanted to recognize Mrs. Eileen Zigerlicki as being a top 16 finalist for Teacher of the Year, and I know that you certainly have more close contact than anyone around the room with her. I was hoping maybe you had some words to share about her as an English teacher at Community.
Absolutely, a fantastic educator, top-notch servant for students. She has been. It is certainly not a surprise for her to be recognized as a Teacher of the Year candidate. I think the title that the state superintendent used was County Educator of the Year. Certainly a superb educator of English instruction, but more so than it's not about English for Mrs. Zigerlicki. It's about serving students. It's about meeting students where they're at, and it is about striving for success with those students. I will also note that Eileen would want me to say that in addition to her award, we also had 2 other individuals in our staff that were recognized in the last few months as well. They include Sherry Jurdy as a Carl Perkins Award winner in the state of North Dakota for a project she led last year with students at Community and Century Elementary, I believe. I apologize if I get that wrong. And our Adult Learning Center instructor at Community High School, Aubrey McNary, is a Fulbright Scholar. Rock stars. Rock stars.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I think that's all the questions we've had for driver's ed as well. All right. Hello. Welcome, and thank you for attending your first meeting, maybe?
I'm the other newbie. My name is Allison Peterson. I'm the director of the Summer Performing Arts Company. Though I'm not new to the program, I've been with the program for over 20 years. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members, for having me. SPA 2020 was remarkable, but not in a way that we had hoped it would be remarkable. We had grand plans, of course, as we always do, and none of them materialized in the way that we hoped. We met as program leaders off and on throughout the summer. We went frequently and discussed, what we could do for the summer. And as time went on and guidelines were given and there were lots of unknowns about facilities, can you sing? Can you sing how much apart? Can you act? Can you do all these things that we normally do with 1,500 students? It became obvious that nothing was going to happen the way that we would normally do them in any given year. And it kind of went against our mission statement to be able to offer opportunities to any child that wants to participate in SPA. And so sadly, none of our programs materialized. However, we did plan a small project to recognize our seniors. Some of our seniors have been in the program 12 years, and if you count all the time that they've been in SPA, that's a full calendar year of schooling that they have been in the program. And we thought it would be very important to recognize them. So we did an online, we featured each one with a senior bio, and there's a video project that's happening right now that should be done about Halloween that we will post online into social media as well. We are looking forward to SPA 2021. I can't wait to see the students again because that's what we need. And I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Peterson? I hope we all get to see SPA in person in 2021 as well.
I do too. Thank you.
Moving on, NDSBA opportunities for board member development. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a quick one, page 21 of your packet. It's just a refresher that the North Dakota School Board convention has been canceled. However, you can see in the memo that there are still going to be some opportunities for you to participate virtually in some sessions. But what this memo is really about is just to inform you that Chris Douthit and Cynthia Schaab will be our delegates, voting delegates on behalf of this board. Did I miss something? Did I miss that on my? Oh, I'm sorry. And Doug Carpenter will be a third. My apologies, Doug. No action is required.
Yes, Scott?
There we go. Just a quick addition to that, the upcoming school law seminar, now that it's in a, I guess remote learning or remote learning for us, I guess. Now that it's not an in-person, learning opportunity, for as long as we have one person in our district attending at the cost of $100, all board members are free. So if any of you are interested in attending those online sessions, we'll get some communication out to you. But I've attended it in the past, and there's been some pretty good material there. So I just wanted to mention that no cost to board members for that component of it. And just real briefly, next week is the Federal Impact Aid conference, and that's normally held in Washington, D.C. This year that is remote as well. There's no cost to that. I will be attending sessions on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons next week. But in a pre-conference session last week, I was told that if there were any individuals that wanted to participate, that I would be able to share out that link for the meeting. So particularly if there's some Air Force Base school district board members that would be interested or whatnot, I can share that out as well. So we with all that's going on with COVID, actually some of the sharing of the information through conferences and whatnot is easier and more cost effective here too. So a little bit of information to come out on those two for you as well. So thank you.
If board members wanted to attend the law seminar, who do they express interest to? Cindy? And as well as the Federal Impact Aid?
Great question. So one thing I did not mention about the School Board Association is they want all of us to register in one group. So we'll gather all the data and we'll send in one registration for our school district.
So Cindy for both, probably? Yes.
Yes, please.
She's taking her head.
I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah. Question, Dr.
Scott, one of the important parts of the NAFIS conference has always been going to our delegations and educating them about something that's going on. Are you guys going to try and do that virtually with the delegation this year or not?
Yes, very good question. We're working on, our state chair is working on trying to schedule some virtual meetings. That would be next Wednesday afternoon. At this point, I have not received that schedule, but we can share that information out as well. And that's, in the past, there's been certain occasions where the meetings are held with staffers of our congressional staff, but there's other times where It's been Senator Hoeven or Senator Kramer, et cetera, that actually sits down and meets with the last time I was there last September, there was a group of about a dozen of us from different, Grand Forks, Minot, and some of the Native American school districts. So it was a pretty neat experience. So I hope we're able to connect virtually here next week as well.
Any questions on that? Okay, move on to superintendent recommendations for action, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Doug? Second, Dr. Lund. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Move on to the annual compliance report. Dr. Brenner?
Thank you very much. Page 27 of your packet. Basically, this is information that we supply to the Department of Public Instruction that we have to do by October 1st of each year. Basically certifying that everybody we have in the seats in terms of staff are certified to be doing what they're doing, from principal to teacher on the certified side of things. And we have done that, done all of our homework internally. So when you see on page 28 where the school compliance report is submitted way to the right, we check yes because we're assuming that the board will approve this tonight for us to send it in. If you look at the approval piece on the left-hand side, that's actually for the Department of Public Instruction to approve. We usually hear from them sometime in the latter part of October, early November, and basically that just certifies us to continue on as a school district. If there are any red flags with the Department of Public Instruction, they let us know what those are, and then we correct those. And those are usually just very minor, if we receive any at all. So district administration, our recommendation is to approve the 2020-2021 annual compliance report.
Do I have a motion to approve the annual compliance report? Cynthia? Second? Bill? All those in any discussion or questions about that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We'll now move on to the student transportation contact. Scott?
Thank you. Page, I'm scrolling up here, page 32 of your board packet. We're in the, what would be the last year of our agreement without renegotiating the entire agreement with Dietrich, or renegotiating the contract in general for transportation services. The contract that we have now is approved in 2014. It was a 3-year contract ending June 30 of 2017, with the option to extend for an additional 4 contract years ended June 30th of 2021. For 2017 to 2018, after year 3, contract extension with the same terms as the rates that were used the previous year was agreed upon. In 2018 to 2019 year, less than 5% increase in rates was negotiated and approved. And at that point, Dietrich installed video cameras in all buses used for special education students. In 2019 to 2020, last fiscal year, an increase of above 4.5% and below 5% increase. And then Dietrich installed cameras on all regular route buses for last fiscal year. Administration, we've met with Dietrich several times over the last several months regarding the current school year contract, and administration has reached a tentative agreement based on an overall 1.25% increase, which would approximate about $30,000 increase for the fiscal year. And after this fiscal year would be year 7 on this agreement, and we need to renegotiate an entirely new agreement, and certainly put out any, if there would be any others that would be interested in bidding at that point in time. So what you have in front of you is a administrative recommendation to approve with a 1.25% increase to the rate structure.
Any questions related to the student transportation contact? Chris?
Mr. Berge, and I look at Group 5, the cost per hour is $34.43, and then peak time it jumps $109 per hour. Is that accurate?
Yes, yep, and so some of that, and that's really what we've had for the last 7 years. It's been adjusted for rate increases, but peak hours, we try to keep from using that, but our usage in that category is relatively limited. A lot of it would be, say, after-school transportation for the middle school football team if they have to get across town or something of that nature. It's a relatively low use category in relationship to for example, Group 1 is a regular bus route that's driving every day.
Thank you. What a difference.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the contract for 2020-2021? Doug and Dr. Lund, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Any motion carried. Now we will move on to the Head Start carryover grant requests. Mr. Thompson?
Actually, Ms. Johnson is here to cover items 6D and E, so I'd ask Tracy to come up and address the board on those two topics.
Thank you. Hello. Would you mind hitting the button? There you go. One more time. There you go. It's on now. Yep.
Now? Okay, sorry. My name is Tracy Johnson. I'm the director of the Grand Forks Head Start program. I have 2 items on the agenda. The first I would like to address is a request for carryover funds from the 2019-2020 fiscal year to the 2020-21 fiscal year. We have $18,065 from our training and technical assistance budget that we were not able to utilize because of COVID. We had a master instructor from Conscious Discipline coming for a week to train our staff, conduct a parenting class, and coach the classrooms for 4 days. And the second training we were not able to attend was sending 6 staff to Arizona for a National Head Start convention. So with your okay on this, I would submit this request to the Office of Head Start to carry over those funds. Any questions regarding the carryover monies?
Do I have a motion to approve the carryover request? Bill? Second? Cynthia? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Yep.
The second item on the agenda is something I need to present to the school board every year per the Head Start performance guidelines. The first one that you will see in your packet is just a history of Head Start nationally, and then a little bit about programmatic changes that we've made at Head Start in Grand Forks since 1985. After that, I have the Policy Council bylaws, the shared program governance, impasse procedures, grievance and complaint procedures, and then the URCIA training. The bylaws for the Policy Council and the shared program governance are guidelines, policies, and procedures that we follow when we conduct our meetings. And I would like to thank Doug Carpenter, Eric Lunn, and now Jackie Hofarth for serving on our Policy Council meetings. We conduct them every month. They are active members, and their input and presence is greatly appreciated. Then I have the URCIA training, which is how we enroll our students at Head Start, and it stands for Eligibility, Recruitment, Selection, Enrollment, and Attendance. In there, you will see the U.S. Census Bureau poverty guidelines that we have to follow. And then you will see at the end the Grand Forks Head Start selection criteria. The selection criteria is different from program to program, county to county. It's based on a point system, and that's how we determine who comes into our program based on the poverty level and the points. And I could talk for 2 hours about how wonderful our program is, but I know you have other items to get to on the agenda. Are there questions regarding any information in this packet?
Questions, Dr. Lund?
Actually, it's not in the packet. My one question is, do you anticipate a lot of changes? I mean, nothing happens during election years, but do you anticipate, or have you heard or read about potential changes in the next year or two with the program in general?
We have our funding for this fiscal year, and I have not heard of any significant changes coming.
Do you still have the site at Valley 4000 this year, given the concerns with COVID?
We do. Intergenerational programming looks a little different right now. It's pretty much Zoom and video with the residents, and a lot of watching through the windows and the fence of the playground.
Well, my grandma just got an iPhone at 80 years old, so she could FaceTime. So
Oh, that's awesome.
you can teach an old dog new tricks. It's sort of as the saying goes.
Absolutely. Even when we were distance learning last spring, March through May, the activities director would film the residents, our teachers would film the students, and they would watch
That's
each
cool.
other. Yeah,
Thank
it's a really fun program.
Good. Shannon?
Have you seen any, or do you anticipate seeing an increased need? I know we're already over need in some. I thought in most of our programs we have more applicants than spots.
We do.
Do you think those numbers will go up?
Not unless we get more money from the federal government. Right now, we are slotted to only serve 187 children. And so we would need more money to serve children.
I guess, what percentages of applicants to, I guess, rejected applicants do we have?
Well, we do have a lot of over-income families that are on our wait list because they don't income qualify, and we are an income qualifying program. I could email you those numbers tomorrow. I don't have up-to-date numbers with me right now, but I could certainly get that information to you.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, and, it's something that we can try to pitch delegates on, to try to push for those programs to get more funding because of the need. I mean, I think COVID's exposed a breakdown in childcare system across the board, and so those types of programs, I think, could use some particular attention coming out of it. So.
We do have some parents that do income qualify that have chosen to not have their children in the classroom face-to-face. We do have one classroom of 18 students that are doing distance learning, and we have a wait list. The last number I saw for that was about 5 children on the wait list for the distance learning. But the kids are really doing a great job keeping their masks on, using hand sanitizer, washing hands. But again, because of Head Start performance standards, we always had to do that. So it's really not a change for us.
No, that's great. And then my grandmother, I won't say how old she is. She turned a very important birthday on Thursday last week, but she has a portal, and portals almost every day with my kids and her other great-grandchildren. So it's, that intergenerational, I think, getting through this time has been particularly important and valuable. So
absolutely. I feel that we were doing such a great job with that partnership with Valley Senior Living and the intergenerational programming, and now to have to stop that, or change it, it's unfortunate.
Thank you. Cynthia?
I feel like I should know this. So where are the sites? So we've talked about Valley.
Yep.
And
We have 2 classrooms at Century Elementary, 1 classroom at Lewis and Clark, 6 classrooms at Lake Agassiz, and 1 distance learner classroom.
And what did you say was the waiting list for the in-person?
I don't have that number, but I can email. Cindy, can I send that to you and you can email to everybody? Okay.
Could you get that into Friday Focus?
Yep.
Dr. Lund, did you have a question?
Tracy, what impact has the Mayville State program had on your program? Has it had an impact at all?
We have a lot of children that are on our wait list from the Mayville program wanting to come into our program. So it's increased our wait list if we don't have room for them and able to serve them.
Other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the policy council bylaws? Chris, second? Cynthia, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
First and second readings of policies and regulations and rescindment of policy. Cynthia?
So we finally get to do the policy ABBA, North Dakota's Comprehensive Model School Policy for Tobacco Use. This is a second reading as written in our packets. And with that, we would then also do the tobacco-free policy violation and rescind our current policy 7010 smoke tobacco-free environment policy. I'd move I'd move to accept the North Dakota's Comprehensive Model School Policy for Tobacco Use and the regulation that goes along with that.
Cynthia, we'll do one at a time.
Okay.
We'll take them each. So there's a motion to approve the comprehensive model school policy for tobacco use. Dr. Lund seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then the next one.
So then we're completing the board regulation policy as adopted here. A motion to approve that tobacco-free policy violation policy regulation.
And do we have a second? Doug, any discussion on this one? Go ahead, Chris.
I would just like to applaud this move. I believe the days of being cited in a 3-day out of school suspension over tobacco, certainly we don't want tobacco in our schools yet. I think that there's a response that's caring and saying to the student, what can we do with you and your family versus punitive. So again, I really see the direction of being concerned, caring, and doing the right things while also holding people accountable. This shift, I think, is so important in so many ways, not just here, but in other policies and procedures that we look at.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And the last one?
And the last is to rescind policy 7010, our smoke tobacco-free environment policy. Now, I think the thing to note here is that the other two really take into vaping and where we've come in 2020 with what tobacco means. So I'd make a motion to delete or rescind that policy.
We have a motion from Cynthia. Do we have a second? Dr. Lund, any discussion? All those in favor of rescinding that policy signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We are now under the announcements section. Do any board members have any announcements? I have two. As always, as I've said before, we have an opportunity to lead by example. So those of us wearing masks and social distancing in this room, thank you very much. Don't forget there's proper hygiene and monitoring your large groups of people as well. This will probably be my last in-person meeting until about December. So I hope next time you see me, I have dropped all my COVID weight and in a healthy way. But I will try to pop on virtually as I'm able. But Dr. Lund, I think you'll be in good hands. So
I won't be losing my COVID weight.
Any other announcements for the good of the order? Any board requests for future considerations at this time? Okay. Jeff, school board norms, how do we do?
I think we did fantastic. Great conversation back and forth and respect for each other. It's fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, followed the time frame well. If there's no other comments or suggestions, we are adjourned. Thank you.